So Longhorn Nation, I'm rapping with Jay Stevens from Locked On Buckeyes, right? We're talking, giving our predictions, talking about how we think the game is going to go. And Jay Stevens said he thinks Ohio State is going to win 31-14. And he said his original prediction was even worse. Do they really think Texas is just about to lay down like that? I guess you'll see on this Locked On crossover, Locked On Longhorns, Locked On Buckeyes. Tap in.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Texas Longhorns, the Ohio State Buckeyes, man, oh man, it's going to be fireworks in Jerry World on Friday night. Jonathan Davis, Locked On Longhorns, Jay Stevens, Locked On Buckeyes. So much to get to in this mammoth, just gigantic juggernaut matchup between the Texas Longhorns and Ohio State Buckeyes. Two of the most storied programs in college football history will be playing Friday night to determine who will be playing for a national championship in the first edition of the 12-team playoff. And, before we get into this Cotton Bowl matchup, I want to talk about Ohio State a little bit leading up to this, right? Because coming into the season, everybody talked about how Ohio State was one of the most talented teams in college football, right? They were on the short list of national championship contenders. So it's no surprise that they're here. They lost to Oregon, but that's one of those games where somebody has to lose. And you felt like, a few plays go different ways. Ohio State wins that game, and Oregon's on the outside looking in. But then you lose to Michigan. And it's the game. Y'all haven't had great luck in it the last 3 or 4 years, but it's the game. Anything can happen. But it's at Ohio State, and it just feels like this year, this is the year that Ohio State is supposed to get their lick back, right? Because Ohio State is the really talented national championship contender, and Michigan is down on their luck, barely bowl eligible. And you lose to Michigan again. And everybody's talking about Ryan Day's job and Ohio State being this disappointing team that didn't even make the Big Ten championship. And it seems like there's just so much turmoil around Ohio State. And then you come out and beat Tennessee by 25. And then you follow that up and beat Oregon by 20. And the final score was 41-21. I don't know if it did well. I saw justice. I mean, that game might as well have been 50-3. You know what I'm saying? I mean, at least that's what it felt like. Jay, what the hell has gotten into the Ohio State Buckeyes?
That loss to Michigan, I'm not going to lie to you. That loss to Michigan kind of lit a fire and did some things internally that needed to happen. Sometimes in losses, there's pressure and you're pushed and your back's up against the wall, and then you got to figure out what you're made of. And there were some internal meetings and there were some conversations that were in-house, and basically it's people calling people out, people doing what is needed for the team to get right. From what I've been told, Caleb Downs hates losing. He doesn't take losing very well. And he was one of those guys that was very vocal during some of those meetings, speaking about why the path that the team was on wasn't right, that losing to Michigan shouldn't have happened, that the defense played out of their minds in that game. If you hold any team to 13 points, you're supposed to win. Doesn't matter if it's the NFL or college, high school, doesn't matter. If you hold any team to 13 points, you're supposed to win that game. Ohio State didn't do that. Last time they were in the Cotton Bowl, I believe they lost 10-3. It was a year ago. They held Missouri to 10 points and still lost the game and had to lead late in the game, and it was 3-0. So the defense, even this year, the defense really wasn't a problem. There were some issues with the defense, but they weren't the main problem. The offense was a problem. But honestly, losing to Michigan, having some of those internal meetings and having players talk about some things that they were disgruntled with, people started to hold each other more accountable than they were previously. And that's kind of spiraled into, well, we didn't beat Michigan. We didn't win the conference. Those are the first 2 goals Ohio State wants to accomplish every year. All of a sudden, it's Tennessee, you're next. You're going to try and come in and take over the shoe? Cool. We got something for you. Oregon, you beat us October 12th. Now we're on the West Coast in the Rose Bowl. Oh, y'all won the Big Ten? We got something for you. Now for Texas, there really isn't the animosity towards Texas where Texas beat Ohio State recently. Last time they played, it's been a while since these two teams have played. Will Howard has never beat Texas. The last time Ohio State was in this very stadium was in the Cotton Bowl last year. They lost. So they have some reasons to want to overcome some adversity internally, where it's not so much Texas beating Ohio State, but it's the stadium, Will Howard versus that team. This team's finding ways to dig deep and to kind of use the whole Michael Jordan thing, where Michael Jordan found a way to have an edge on everybody. Well, Ohio State right now is finding a way to have an edge on every single team, and they're taking that edge out on that team on whatever day they're playing, whatever day of the week it is. And they're playing physical, they're playing violent, they're playing fast, and no team the past 2 games has had an answer for Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing hotter than Ohio State right now is LeAngelo Ball and his new song, right? You know what I'm saying?
Got that right.
Swerving and bending that corner. You know what I'm saying? That's the only thing hotter than Ohio State right now. What, from the Ohio State side, you, Jay Stevens, Ohio State fans, what is the perception of Texas coming into this game? Because I thought early on, looking at this matchup, I was like, this is the natty before the natty. And then I calmed myself down because I'm like, Notre Dame does look really good, right? I would not be surprised if Notre Dame won the national championship. I don't know if I should be saying that, right now while Texas is still in it. But that does look like a championship team to me. But it kind of feels like Texas and Ohio State maybe are in a different class. But the way that Ohio State has been playing, it's like, oh, okay, they look by far the best team in the playoff. And then you see Vegas, has them. Last time I checked, they were favored by 6. I'm not sure if it's gone up again. It started at 5, and then they were favored by 6. So they're favored by a touchdown. And I get the feeling that Ohio State fans are looking at this Texas team and like, no, we should be favored by even more than 6 points. Like, we think we're going to go in there and beat Texas by a touchdown. What are your early thoughts on the Texas Longhorns coming into this matchup? Do you feel like it's going to be, a heavyweight fight on Friday night, or do you think that Texas is just next on the list?
I think it should be preseason. Many people thought this was going to be a heavyweight fight if they met in the playoff. Now, some people were thinking, well, maybe it's a national championship matchup because it'd be crazy for the team to beat the 2 teams in the natty to be the teams that play week 1 in the following season. But right now, I have respect. I personally have respect for Texas. I know Quinn Ewers is a good quarterback. He's a solid quarterback. He has his setbacks at times. He makes some wild decisions at times, but he's a good, solid college football quarterback. Good running game, good talent at receiver, good offensive line. Defense is one of the better defenses in the country. So there's a lot of respect for what Texas has and for Steve Sarkisian and what he has done down there in Austin, Texas. The issue is Ohio State's just better. And it's not just better in like one position or 2 positions. If you put Ohio State's defense versus Texas's defense, Ohio State's defense is better. If you put Ohio State's offense versus Texas's offense, this isn't a knock to saying Texas doesn't have talent and Texas doesn't have future NFL players. Ohio State's been playing more efficient football of late. And I think it's where Ohio State fans are right now. It's not a knock against Texas. They realize the talent Texas has. But a lot of Ohio State fans just have a belief that Ohio State is just better.
Okay, right. So Ohio State is just better. Whew. Damn, Jay. Okay. Look. All right. Here. Okay. This is, look, I get that Ohio State is a very talented team, right? I get that they've scored 40 points in 2 straight playoff games and won them by 20. It's called Texas Fight for a reason. You know what I'm saying? And I think that Ohio State fans, and I think a little bit of what you just said, I think y'all are kind of expecting Texas to just come in this game and lay down a little bit. Like, I think you still got to realize that y'all still got to play this Texas team for 60 minutes, maybe more, and you have to beat us. And, you talk about this Ohio State team and how talented they are, right? You're going against one of the best pass defenses in college football we've ever seen. I know that Will Howard has been very hot the last couple of weeks, but just like Quinn Ewers, would you say that Will Howard could be prone to those off games, those off moments where it's like you should be better? Would you say that coming into this game or coming into some games this season, you felt like Will Howard may be a question mark?
Into the season, yes. Into this game, no. There's only been one bad game in Will Howard's Ohio State career. That was against Michigan. There was a big hit, and I don't think he was fully recovered or even recovered enough to come back to be the Will Howard that people expect him to be. Outside of that, Will Howard may have 1 or maybe 2 boneheaded mistakes in a game. We saw it against Penn State, pick 6 early in the game. You may see an overthrown pass or an interception where it's like, what are you doing? I think he had that against Iowa. But for the most part, Will Howard has been better than advertised. He's been very, very efficient. He's, I think, top 5 in the country in completion percentage. He has had 6 games this year of a completion percentage of over 80%. And so Will Howard and Quinn Ewers really, really good. I don't think Will Howard has the elite arm talent. When I think about efficiency and like elite quarterbacks, Will Howard is efficient. He can complete passes. He's doing stuff now in the playoff he didn't do in the regular season. But no, his arm talent is not elite. I would never say that about this quarterback. But he's just been super, super efficient. Now, I'm not going to gloss over the reality that he's throwing to Jeremiah Smith. He could be a pro. By many people in the NFL circles, he could go into the NFL draft right now and be a pro next year if he was eligible to. He is throwing to Emeka Buka, who's probably going to be a first-round pick. He has Cardinal Tate, who when Tate goes out to the NFL draft after next season, will probably be a first-round pick. So he's throwing to future pros. So I can't gloss over the fact that Will Howard's career season, best year in college, is he's throwing to Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Buka, and Cardinal Tate. I can't gloss over that. But I also have to realize that he's throwing with a level of a pinpoint accuracy at times that nobody really expected from him, because that's not a part of his game. His game is at a level right now that it's never been in college. And I think his efficiency is one of the best traits he's had all season long, and it's been showing up in a big way in the playoff.
Right. So I look at Will Howard, and I understand everything that you've just said. I still think there's some inconsistency there. I still think that you come into this matchup and you look at all of this talent around Will Howard, and you're asking him to somewhat be a game manager like Quinn Ewers, right? You're asking him more so not to lose the game rather than to go out and win it. And you just kind of laid that out, right? Like you're throwing to 3 NFL wide receivers. Mm-hmm. Just don't mess it up. So I'm not sure that we can just act as if like going into this game, Will Howard is 2019 Joe Burrow, right? Like there is the chance that this defense can be too much for Will Howard to handle. We look at this Ohio State offensive line, right? Missing 2 starters still, I believe, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay. We look at this running game, which has been great. Not in every game, but it has been good in the playoffs. And then this defense, now they've only given up 20 points twice this season, and that was both to Oregon. But if anybody can find a way to score points, I think it would be Steve Sarkisian in this offense. I guess my point is that everybody is looking at this matchup as if Ohio State is just going to roll over Texas. And you passed the test. Ohio State has passed the test. They beat Tennessee and Oregon. Like this isn't Penn State beating SMU and Boise State. This isn't even Texas beating Clemson and Arizona State. Ohio State has beaten 2 really good teams. But I think Texas is a legitimate national championship contender. And I guess what I'm getting from the Ohio State side is that Texas is just another team on the list. And I think you and the Ohio State fans are sadly mistaken about that. Now we're going to get into a quick word from the sponsors, a quick word from Rocket Money. You know, we do got to pay the sponsors. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Ohio State and Texas, 2 legitimate national championship contenders, 2 heavyweight contenders, and it's going to be a drag them out type fight, on Friday night. We discuss more after the break. All right, this Locked On crossover, Locked On Longhorns, Locked On Buckeyes is brought to you by Rocket Money. Let me get this on the screen for my YouTube viewers, right? Get that overlay up there on the screen. Let's get to the money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. It's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Once again, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. All right, Jay, coming back in hot on the Locked On crossover. Once again, Locked On Longhorns, Locked On Buckeyes. And I want to talk about the quarterback position. And you've had the pleasure of covering both of these quarterbacks, right? How long have you been doing Locked On Buckeyes now?
Since 2020.
Since 2020. So you've had, once again, the pleasure of covering both of these quarterbacks. What is the general feeling amongst the Ohio State camp in terms of Quinn Ewers, right? Just fans in terms of how they feel about him, once being there and then leaving Ohio State, and then how they feel about him coming into this matchup.
Two things. One, I want to piggyback something from the previous segment. I don't think Texas is a team that Ohio State's just going to roll right over. I think Texas matches up better with Ohio State than Tennessee does. And I do think Texas is a team that can do a lot of things to pose a threat against Ohio State that other teams cannot do. Tennessee couldn't do it. Oregon, you thought could, but Ohio State just found ways to crack the code from Jump Street. I do have massive respect for Texas. I'm not trying to say things where it's like, I don't respect Texas. No, I have massive respect for Texas. I just have seen what Ohio State is, and the talent right now is producing in a way that's at an elite level. For Quinn Ewers, though, I don't think there's really any bad blood. I think the way that he left high school and went to Ohio State, I think that part might have ruffled some feathers, but I don't think him leaving really hit hard because it made a lot of sense. He wasn't going to start his second year in Columbus. Why won't you just go somewhere where you're going to play right away and play quicker than you would if you were at Ohio State? That's how I view it. And I think it's why a lot of guys right now in college football, if you go somewhere early and it doesn't work out and you leave and you go somewhere else, maybe that other path is your quicker path to get on the field, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's what the portal is here for. For Quinn Ewers, I think he's a well-respected quarterback. I don't think any Ohio State fans are going to sit out here and say, well, Quinn Ewers is trash. He doesn't do anything. If you watch the Arizona State game, you may say there's a play here or a play there. But in totality, Quinn Ewers is a good quarterback, a solid quarterback. And if Ohio State's corners or if their secondary is sleeping, he can torch you. Like, everybody realizes that. So, no, I don't really think there's bad blood. Maybe with the way that he came to Ohio State, or maybe there might be some fans that are still holding a grudge by the way he left. Like, let that stuff go, man. He was 18, 19 years old. His parents were very influential in that decision to first leave high school in the way that he did, and that was unprecedented. It's very odd for that to happen, but also he went to go play football down in his home state. If I'm a kid, 18 years old or 17 years old, and I can have a chance to make $1 million right away, and everybody in my circle is saying, go do it, I might do that too. And then if I go to that school and say, yeah, I'm not going to beat out C.J. Stroud to be quarterback, I need to go somewhere else, and I got a chance to go to the biggest school in the state, I might do that too. So I don't think there's bad blood. I think there's a massive respect for Quinn Ewers because of how well he has played down there in Austin.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Will Howard the last couple of games, I looked at these stats and he's playing his best ball, right? I think this is his best two, game stretch of the season, especially when you look at the stakes, right? Mm-hmm. Playoffs, win or go home. 41 of 55, 75% completion percentage. You talked about that efficiency, 630 yards and 5 touchdowns. When you look at this quarterback matchup, I look at Quinn Ewers and I look at Will Howard, and I say Will Howard may be a little bit more dynamic, right, in terms of his ability to maybe extend plays and run the ball, right, where Quinn Ewers is more of kind of like the pocket quarterback. But I do think I look at this matchup and say they are the two wild cards, right? I think you're looking at two teams that have elite talent across the board. And this very well, it sounds cliche, like whichever quarterback plays better, but I don't think there's a huge edge either way, right? Like, if you think Will Howard is better, cool, but I don't think he's head and shoulders above Quinn Ewers. And if you think Quinn Ewers is better, cool, but I don't think he's head and shoulders above Will Howard. I think whichever quarterback can be the best version of themselves on Friday night will be enough to push one team over the edge. But I wouldn't be surprised one way or the other if Will Howard outplays Quinn Ewers or Quinn Ewers outplays Will Howard. Now, we saw, in my opinion, there has been some inconsistency from Quinn Ewers. but we saw a legacy-defining moment for him, right? Where everybody's clamoring for Quinn, Arch Manning. Everybody's saying the ceiling of this team would be higher with Arch Manning. 4th and 13. You're down 7 points. If you don't convert 4th and 13, you are going home in disappointing fashion to Arizona State. And he throws a touchdown pass 30, 40 yards down the field to keep Texas' season alive. Then he comes back the very next offensive play and throws another touchdown pass and then converts a 2-point conversion to ultimately push Texas past Arizona State. He's coming into this game with a ton of momentum against his former team. But I talked about the way that Will Howard is coming into this game as well. What do you think the change has been for him, right? Has it been the playmakers around him stepping up? Has it been something within him? Is Chip Kelly dialing it up a little bit more? What have you seen from Will Howard the last 2 games that gives you this utmost confidence that he can lead Ohio State to victory against Texas?
It's been a consistency from what we saw in the regular season outside of that Michigan game, because that was a one anomaly where it's like, this just doesn't look like the Will Howard we have seen most of the year. But the one thing that Chip Kelly has done, and I think Ryan Day's been saying now, let's flip this switch to go with an up-tempo offense, and it's just working to perfection. There are reasons why early in games Ohio State's having 2-play drives, 3-play drives, and they're going for touchdowns. It's because this offense can flow up-tempo like crazy. I mean, there's 150 yards, 200 yards in the first quarter. Like 21, they got up 21-0 against Tennessee. They got up 34-0 against Oregon. The up-tempo offense is one that Will Howard works very well with that. Didn't see it really at all in the regular season. It was one of the weirdest things where we saw 4-minute drills and 2-minute drills, and all of a sudden when Ohio State had to go fast just due to the clock, they went out and scored very quickly and moved very efficiently. And we're thinking, why don't you do this the whole time? Well, Ryan, they kind of slow walked this thing, did a more methodical approach to the offense this year, and started huddling more and chose a slower pace to kind of save the players' bodies for this time of year. It worked out to perfection. Buckeyes got potentially 2 more games left. You got to beat Texas first. You got to do whatever it takes. And that means continuing with the up-tempo offense that has gotten you here. If you don't go with the up-tempo, I do think that plays into Texas's hands and Texas being able to find a way to overcome the talent that Ohio State has to potentially win the game. But if Ohio State decides to continue with the up-tempo offense, which is what I expect them to do, I do think Will Howard will flourish with that style of offense on Friday night.
Yeah, now, albeit in double overtime, we've talked about Ohio State being able to put up points. That's what you're talking about. Ohio State putting up 40-plus points in both of those games. Texas, no slouch, right? 39 points against Arizona State, once again, albeit in double overtime. 38 points against Clemson, right? So 77 total points from the Longhorns. Both teams have been lighting up the scoreboard.
Yes.
You talked earlier in the episode about Ohio State's defense being just better than Texas, which is a statement because the Texas defense, they've given up. They've had some leaks in the playoff games, but like I said, been one of the best in the country all season. What gives you confidence about this Ohio State defense, or what makes this Ohio State defense so good that even a team averaging 38.5 points in their playoff games coming into this matchup really doesn't concern you because this defense is doing what?
They're having the ability to be so creative, and they're getting play from elite players at the right time. Caleb Downs gets a lot of attention, gets a lot of praise. His running mate, Lathan Ransom, is a guy you cannot sleep on, you cannot gloss over. And I believe in the past 2 games, he hit Dylan Sampson in the Tennessee game, knocked him out for the game. He hit Jordan James the very next game, knocked him out for the game. I mean, he's a very heavy hitter. He's a violent player. But Ohio State has found ways via Jim Knowles' creativity, and Jim Knowles doing a lot of the stuff he did when he was at Oklahoma State via stuff with the defensive line and moving the corners around and changing the looks pre-snap versus post-snap. This team is so smart, and they're able to adjust on the fly. They're also getting more pressure on the quarterback. Now, the sack number from the Oregon game, you may say, Jay, how many sacks did they have? 8 sacks against Oregon. All of that was not due to the front four, the rush from the defensive line. A lot of those were coverage sacks where the coverage was so well where Dylan Gabriel was trying to go to his 3rd read and 4th read and couldn't do it. And he couldn't get outside the pocket because Tuimoloau and Sawyer, they were keeping him inside the pocket. And Tyleik Williams is a guy that was getting pressure up the middle. So no matter if it was pressure with 4 or blitzing getting pressure on Dylan Gabriel or the coverage sacks, which I believe most of those sacks were technically coverage sacks, they're able to just do whatever it takes to take away what the other team is going to do. Also, while Texas has really good running backs, I forget the exact number. I think Texas had over 200 rushing yards against Clemson. Ohio State's one of the best rush defenses in the country. So while Ohio State is really good in pass coverage, top 5, maybe number 1 in some categories in the country, the rush defense is one of the best defenses in the country too. And in only 3 games, 2 teams have scored over 17 points against Ohio State this year. Oregon did it twice, and then once with Tennessee. Everybody else was 17 or less. And that was before the Oregon loss. This defense is figuring out ways to slow teams down and contain them at an elite level. I think even with Texas's firepower and Quinn Ewers and some of the receivers and the O-line that has been playing well, I do think Ohio State's defense is going to have answers for whatever Sarkisian throws at them.
Jeez. We'll see what happens Friday night, right? Like we continue to say, a big heavyweight matchup. We're going to get to the money real quick and then come back. I want to talk a little bit about Ryan Day, right? I want to talk a little bit about Ryan Day and then get into what we think is going to happen in this matchup. Great stuff. Jonathan Davis, Jay Stevens thus far, Locked On Longhorns, Locked On Buckeyes. Jay, somebody was talking about the beauty of the 12-team playoff, right? Because we're getting a chance to see, stories being written and, legacies being, written that maybe we wouldn't have gotten in the 4-team playoff. Maybe Ohio State isn't here at all in the 4-team playoff, right? If you lose to Michigan, lose to Oregon, and don't even, make the conference championship game. And I get the feeling that coming into the playoffs, there was a lot of question mark about Ryan Day, even amongst the fan base, right? Mm-hmm. There was a lot of, is he the guy? At best, I think even the most optimistic Ohio State fans were like, give him one more year. If they weren't like, fire his ass. My barber's an Ohio State fan. He was like, fire his ass. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, even the most optimistic Ohio State fans was probably like on the edge. He's done a lot for himself to win these 2 games in this fashion, but it almost feels like you have to finish the job, right? Because if you lose to Texas, it almost feels like all of that good grace you've built up over the last 2 weeks kind of goes right back out the window, and you go right back to the coach that lost to Michigan again. So what are your thoughts on Ryan Day if he cannot get it done in this matchup against Texas? Do you think he's built up some leeway over the last 2 weeks if they happen to lose on Friday night? Or do you think it's natty or bust for Ryan Day at this point, especially amongst the fan base?
Amongst the fan base, I think it's different than what the athletic director is going to do. The AD has already come out 3 times in between the Michigan loss and the Tennessee game. He came out and said Ryan Day's not going anywhere. Ryan Day is going to be here in 2025. That's Ryan Day's boss. And I think his word, his word means way more than a fan base, any fan out there. It doesn't really matter. If my boss believes in me, I don't care what anybody else says because I got job security. After that Michigan loss, I will say this. There were more disgruntled fans after that Michigan loss than probably ever in Ryan Day's tenure. After the Cotton Bowl loss a year ago, basically a calendar year ago against Missouri, many people, myself included, were very, very confused and concerned with the poor game plan, the lack of ability to adjust. You had to play your backup quarterback because Kyle McCord's in the portal. He didn't stay with the team. All of a sudden, your backup goes down. You're down to QB3, who wasn't prepared for the moment. If you already know you're playing your backup and you're changing yourself on the offensive line, why not get your third-string quarterback, who's not your backup, a little bit more prepared to play? But also, he's not ready for the speed. He hasn't played a lot. So the Michigan loss is one thing. The Missouri loss is another. A lot of people were very, very disgruntled. I have never been a natty or bust guy for Ryan Day in the playoff. And I don't think a lot of fans right now will say that he's a natty or bust kind of coach right now. And if they were the ones deciding his job, I think Ryan Day has done enough in a lot of people's eyes that if Ohio State were to lose to Texas, it would take I won't say historic. I won't say historic at all. Texas will just be the better team that day. Like, I have no problem saying, like, if Texas wins, they're the better team that day. Ohio State sometimes loses because they're not the better team that day. Happened against Oregon the first time they met. I think Ryan Day has done a lot of good for himself and a lot of Ohio State fans. But if you lose to Texas, there's still some questions that he has to answer, and you still got to beat Michigan. Yes, that final hardware at the end of the season is very, very important and more important than a regular season game. Don't get me wrong. The game is a game. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, you want that hardware. You want to be able to say you were the national champion. But if the game plan is good, the players play well, and Ohio State loses, just got to say it wasn't Ohio State. Texas won the game. Texas was a better team. But the game plan's poor. The Michigan game plan or the Missouri game plan, and the coaches don't adjust, and the coaches just don't get the job done. That's where the questions come in. That's where things get a little bit cloudy and a little bit confusing about Ryan Day's tenure, because you won a couple big games, but now you're in Texas. Texas it's not far from the stadium you're playing in. And maybe you just got a little spooked because you're down there and a lot of snow down there in the South, and you didn't know what to do. I think Ryan has done a lot of good for himself, but you got to win this game. You can't do those past two performances against Tennessee and against Oregon and then come out here when you are a touchdown favorite over Texas and just simply lay an egg. You can't do that. That's not acceptable. He's going to coach week 1 next year against Texas. I believe that 100%. But if that's a flop too, we got a lot of questions about Ryan Day.
Right. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And, certainly don't ever want to call for anybody's job or anything like that. But, I do hope that Texas wins on Friday night and that makes it interesting. I want to talk now about who we think is going to win and why. And I'm picking Texas in this game, and I think Texas just rises to the occasion. I think that this is an interesting spot for Texas, coming into this game, because they get to put that Kirby Smart type, chip on their shoulder, right? That nobody believed in us, even though it's like, bro, everybody picked you to win the Natty, right?
Right.
Like, I think, what I'm saying? Like, I think Texas is coming into this game seriously. Like, everybody's expecting Ohio State to roll over them like they've rolled over their previous opponents. And Texas is looking like we're really damn good too. And I know this game isn't in Austin, but this game is in Texas, right? This game is in the state of Texas, and the University of Texas is playing in this matchup. And I think that means something to these boys, right? And I think that they want to go out and hold serve in their home state. And I think that Texas is a damn good football team. I think this is a really good defense. I think they're going to rise to the occasion. I think Ohio State is going to score some points. I mean, you talked about that wide receiver core, best running back duo in the country, and Will Howard is a playmaker. Chip Kelly pulling the strings. They're going to be able to score some points. But I think Steve Sarkisian and this offense are going to be able to score some points as well. And you talked about what we have on the offensive side of the ball, and I think they're clicking. I think coming off of a matchup like that against Arizona State, where your season was in the balance, right, where it was one play, you were 13 yards away from going home and asking yourself, what if? And you live to fight another day. You live to play in this game against Ohio State. I think that's all the momentum they need to come in and not only beat Ohio State in this game, but carry themselves possibly to a national championship on MLK Day. I think Texas finds a way to win this game against Ohio State 31-28. I think Will Howard makes the play at the end of the game that secures a victory for the Texas Longhorns. I talked about that inconsistency. I talked about him being maybe a wild card or question mark. I think he proves it at the end of the game on Friday night, and Texas gets out of the Cotton Bowl with a victory, leaving more question marks for Ryan Day amongst the Ohio State fan base. What do you think happens in this game? Who wins and why, Jay Stevens?
I'm going with Ohio State, and I actually lowered where I originally thought the margin of victory was going to be because of the respect that I have for Texas. Texas's pass defense can do some things against Ohio State's receivers that neither Oregon nor Tennessee were able to do. Texas's pass rush can do some things against an O-line that's reconstructed, been playing well in the playoff, been playing well once they got some practices under their belt. And I think that's one of the things that can confuse some Ohio State fans. Like, whoa, Texas has this. Yes, Texas is a talented team. Like, I'm not going to sit up here and say, just because I think Ohio State's going to win, that I'm going to be like, well, no, Texas is trash. No, they earned their right to be in this spot. And you have to respect teams like that. You mentioned Will Howard and some of the inconsistencies there. I actually think Will Howard's efficiency is going to be one of the things that's going to be one of the themes throughout the game. Early and often and consistently, he'll be efficient throughout the game. He is going to have one of those two throws, though. an overthrown ball, a throw behind the receiver. Those are things you can expect from Will Howard every single game. He's probably going to give you about 2 of those throws. But outside of that, pinpoint accuracy, efficient, leading the offense. And I think one of the biggest reasons why I'm going with Ohio State, before I give a score prediction, the backfield is working very well together. There's 2 things. One, the backfield. I think Travion Henderson is going to have a 100 rushing yard game and 2 touchdowns once again, because I just think he's locked in and he's not ready to be done wearing the scarlet and gray. But that defense, a defense that's only allowed in 3 games to have 3 games where teams have scored over 17 points. Oregon did it twice, once to Tennessee. I think some of the issues with Quinn Ewers this year, they even showed up against Arizona State. You talk about some of those good things, talk about some of those bad things as well. I think some of those issues are going to be a lot harder because of how well Ohio State's pass coverage has been and how hard it has been for teams to score through the air against Ohio State. The pass rush, once again, is going to be very, very big. Cody Simon, the number 0, is going to be a menace and be a man possessed once again. I got Ohio State winning 31, Texas 14. Got the Buckeyes winning this game. The margin of victory, like I said, was a lot larger originally.
Wait, hold on, brother.
Yeah, you're good.
You have Texas losing by 17, and you said you calmed that down. What was the original one?
I didn't have a score. I thought Ohio State was going to win by 21. Just to be honest with you, I didn't have a score with that one. I was like, I told my buddy Monday, I was like, "No, I think Ohio State's going to win by 21." But I was like, "No, I can't do that. Like, I have too much respect for what Texas is."
You went down to 17.
I did.
Okay.
I did. The way Ohio State's playing, they're playing in a way that they are locked in so well. They're so ready to just burst out there on the field. The preparation is at an elite level. And I don't think with the way that Ohio State's playing, anybody can beat them. I truly don't think that. It's the defense that's why I only think Texas is going to score 14. It's not because of a lack of what Texas is able to do offensively. It's because of how well Ohio State's defense is playing, not just in the playoff, but how they played all year long.
Right. I mean, Texas did score 15 against Georgia, so I guess I can't say that them scoring 14 is just absolutely out of the
What was the score?
The
I forget the score in the SEC championship. How much did they score in that?
SEC champ. Well, that one went to overtime, but that was it 20 something to 19?
I saw it earlier today, but I forget the final score.
Damn, I can't
But
remember.
I do know it was 15-30 in the first meeting against Georgia.
Yeah. I think Texas may have scored 19 in the SEC championship.
Okay.
So, it's not super out of the question.
Right.
The beauty of football is we could talk all day. We could sit on our podcast chairs in front of our podcast mics and talk to the cows come home. They got to play the game on Friday night. Yeah. And I know, whether you're a Texas fan, whether you're an Ohio State fan, we're all going to look forward to watching this matchup. Jay Stevens, Jonathan Davis, great stuff. Locked on Longhorns, Locked on Buckeyes. Talking about the semifinals, the Cotton Bowl, and the first edition of the 12-team playoff. Texas Longhorns, Ohio State Buckeyes, 2 of the most storied programs in college football history, battled it out for a chance to win a national championship on Friday night in Cowboy Stadium. To all my Longhorn fans, to all the Buckeye fans, peace.